I'm Travis Macy. I'm here in Salida, Colorado, a little town in the heart of the Rockies, and I'm an athlete, author, speaker, and coach. I also host a podcast called The Travis Macy Show, and we like to talk about actually, everyone here has been a guest on the show. I love talking about this stuff in addition to endurance athletics and that kind of thing. And, also like our other panelists, I was kind of drafted into this relationship with Alzheimer's and other forms of neurodegenerative disease, because my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 5 years ago at the age of 64. And I always want to make clear I'm not pretending to be a medical expert or anything like that. I'm just a guy who's trying to share a story and make a difference for people. And we've been trying to do that with our book that came out, A Mile at a Time, a couple months ago. It kind of shares my dad's story and stuff. And as far as, the importance of physical activity, Ed's always talking about these pillars, these pillars of cognitive wellness. You got staying active, managing mental health, cognitive training, diet and nutrition. We talked about that a lot. And then relationships. We'll get into that later. But all these things are super important. And, my wheelhouse kind of as an athlete and as a coach of adult endurance athletes is this physical fitness realm. And, as Annie already said, physical fitness, that's going to mean different things to different people. There has been some good research on it. There was, a study from Wake Forest that just showing that consistent, moderate exercise makes a big difference. It's in so many ways, cognitively, but it also does for the cardiovascular system, the heart, the lungs, the circulation of the blood. Like, all of these things are connected, and by exercising, you're just making it all better. And my advice, again, when I hear people, we're all wired differently. When I hear people talk about willpower to go exercise, I'm like, man, if I don't exercise, I go nuts, and that's true for some people. It's not true for everyone. For some people, it is hard. It is a grind, and I think that's worth recognizing. But if there's a way that you can somehow, over time, just make it part of your habit and part of what you do, and hopefully something that you enjoy at least a bit, that's the way to make it happen. I always tell the athletes I coach, consistency and sustainability are the key here. It's less about doing the exact right thing or the right lifts or walk or routine or heart rate or whatever. It's really about consistency. And for me, there's pathways to consistency that maybe are surprising. So, for example, fun. That's a huge way to make something consistent. Or community and relationships. Those are pillars of brain health. Can we find a way to integrate those with exercise? So maybe for someone that's joining a group at the gym, or a walking group, or there's these ladies in my neighborhood every single day, 6 a.m. They go past my house and they're chatting, they're talking, but they're pros, and they're super consistent. And I think it's that community connection. So how can you make these things line up together? And also, if there's many roads that lead to Rome. So for some people, you look at January 1st, everyone joins the gym and then they're empty 3 weeks later, right? Well, that's for a lot of people, the gym is not the best thing. I don't like going to a gym. I don't find that to be fun. So figure out what works for you. Is it the gym? Is it walking outside? Is it running? Is it biking? Is it maybe your thing is gardening. I know people who they make yard work into an athletic event, and it's the thing that they like, and they approach it with gusto, and they're out there breathing pretty hard, doing your thing. So figure out ways to do it creatively. And then maybe I'll end with this before we get to questions. Don't overdo it as well. And that's something, again, in my own personal experience and in coaching these endurance athletes, you start hearing about these things, the ultra run or the Ironman or whatever. These things can be good. They're often overly glorified. We also have, I think, these kind of type A mentalities of push now, push hard, sleep when I'm dead, never rest, all that kind of stuff. And I learned like that's not wise. You know, you can absolutely put yourself into a hole and do negative things as far as just the entire endocrine system, cognitive function, Alzheimer's risk, et cetera, by exercising not enough, especially if you're also not fueling enough and if you're not sleeping enough. You know, you can definitely overdo it. And that's where, you know, again, if you listen to the podcast or you watch the movies and you hear these people like, you know, every day I run a marathon, or like, you know, every day I get up at, you know, whatever, 3 a.m. and go do my thing. Like, you know, that's maybe it's inspiring and it makes you sound tough, but I think like, boy, temper that, pull that back a little bit and focus on the sleep. That's a big thing that I've changed since my dad was diagnosed, is like, you know, I still get up sometimes and I'll do my early morning mission because I'm excited to, like Andy said, hike a peak or, you know, hit some ski line or something. But I think a lot more about that, and I'm really focused on that good quality sleep and the recovery as well.
You know, Travis, one thing I wanted to ask you, just because I think so much of this is mindset, and I think you're talking a lot about mindset and how people should approach and think about exercise or physical activity. So when you just to get inside your head for a moment, so people, this might help a lot of people. When you are, and it's funny that I think it's really modest that you're speaking about it in such practical terms, because what you do is you go and literally do 100-mile runs, okay, at high altitudes. I mean, but when you're in the middle of that, I just want to know, you know, when you're at mile 76 and it's still uphill and there's no air up there because the air's so thin, what is actually going on in your mind? Like, what are you thinking? What's going through your head? I just want to know. It could help me, actually. Yeah. I hope it helps some other people. So
well, thanks, Ed. That's a good question. I mean, you know, maybe there's like lightning looming and I'm just like, I hope I don't, you know, I'm going to run down this hill as fast as I can so I don't die. I try to avoid that scenario. The long answer is I wrote another book called The Ultra Mindset, and that kind of goes into this stuff deeply. But briefly, I might say like it's all about the stories that we tell ourselves, and often for me, I think one of the things that one of my mantras, I guess, is I don't have to believe everything that I think. And so, you know, just like everyone else, I have this negative bullshit that goes through my mind, and negative ruminations and you know, doubts and uncertainties and just things that I'm dealing with. Like we all have that. But I think if we step back, we can also choose, you know, am I going to buy into, you know, this story, or am I going to kind of rewrite a positive one, or choose something else that's the narrative that I'm going to roll with? So that can be huge, you know, with things like dietary habits, with exercise habits, even with, hey, maybe you're listening to this and like you're helping a family member navigate Alzheimer's. Maybe you've been diagnosed with this and you're listening to this. Like, that's a really hard place to be. And I think you probably have some choice with it, you know, and that's something like looking at my dad. I mean, you know, his disease has progressed significantly over the last 5 years, and he's choosing happiness. You know, he's not focusing on here's all the things that I used to be able to do and I can't do anymore. He's saying here's like the couple things left that I can do, and this is awesome. And I'm pumped to do it. And I know Liz is going to get into the caregiving aspect. Like, boy, talk about a grind. I mean, you know, you think running 100 miles is hard. Like, try taking care of someone day in and day out, you know, month after month, year after year. Like that is a real grind. And those, in my opinion, like those are the true heroes, and those are the people who really have an ultra mindset and can you know, think about the stories they're telling themselves, but also think about how they can take care of themselves, and hopefully think about how it can be a team initiative as well. That's one of the sayings from our book, is that life is a team sport, and you get to pick your team. So, you know, that can tie into all of this.
Trav, I have a practical question. So the recommendations for exercise in the average week is 150 minutes
Yep.
for prevention of cardiovascular disease, and that also spills over into brain diseases like Alzheimer's. But there's also benefit that has been shown for Alzheimer's prevention at 300 minutes a week, which is really not as much as it seems, right?
Yeah.
So let's say that you were someone who was exercising somewhere between 150 and 300 minutes a week. What do you recommend breaking that down into cardiovascular, where, you know, your heart is pumping and it's hard to talk, like you're really working out, versus strength training, versus restorative work, such as say, like using a melt roller or something of that sort?
Yeah. That's a great question, Andy. And I mean, I think it's highly personalized, and it's going to vary significantly from person to person. It's going to vary significantly throughout our lifespan. So as we all get older, you know, unless you're like still in puberty or maybe in your 20s, like you know, in some ways you're trying to slow down the slowdown, especially when it comes to strength and muscle mass and bone density. So as we get older, doing weight bearing activities, whether that's going to the gym, doing weights, whether it's body weight stuff right in your house, doing some push-ups or pull-ups, or like I do my crunches every night when I'm reading to my daughter in bed. Like, you know, I can't really find time to go to the gym and do a core workout. So like I'm laying there reading, might as well just do my crunches, you know, make it sustainable. So that becomes increasingly important. The mobility stuff is very important, especially and for a lot of athletes. If we're trying to keep going with stuff, like injuries pop up, you know, your back starts hurting and this and that, and so often I find that doing that mobility stuff, like you said, the foam roller, or even if it's just some stretching or yoga, you know, a little 10-minute yoga routine. I mean, if I don't do yoga right when I get out of bed, like I'm not making it past the front door. So
I didn't know that you
those,
did yoga first thing in the morning.
yeah, of course I do. Yeah. But those, like doing those things, they allow you to keep doing the other exercise and activity, hopefully. And then I would also say, you know, again, let's say it was 5 hours a week, maybe, if someone's doing aerobic activity. Some people, a natural inclination is to push that too hard. So your typical runner or someone getting into it, it's like, here's my 4-mile loop, and every day, like, I'm racing that. It's like, oh, what was my time yesterday? And today I'm going to go faster, and tomorrow I'm going to go faster than that. And that's a lot better than nothing. But generally speaking, and I think also for brain health and cardiovascular health, like 80% of that time that you're running or walking or biking or swimming, probably about 80% of that should be in a sustainable, what we call an aerobic, you know, exercise level. So that means that you could be using heart rate, you could be using power on the bike, you can do all these things. But for most people, that means, can you hold a conversation with someone? You know, could you talk with someone on the phone? Could you talk with someone next to you? Maybe it's you. And I go on a lot of runs with my dogs, and I'm like, all right, can I talk to my dogs right now? You know, so try doing that, because that's, if all you're doing is every time you go out, you're just going as fast as you can. That's not a way to sustainability, and that's a way to, you know, get injured and burn out and not have the maximum benefit. So, you know, maybe 20% of the time or so, you are pushing it, or you're running faster, you're biking faster, or whatever. But overall, most of it, and maybe that's why I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh, I got to go running. It's like, because you think of it as this thing where you're just out there racing. You know, most of it should feel like pretty easy and sustainable, you know, kind of an all day sort of effort.
Yeah, and data also shows that even, you know, just moving your body every day, even really light exercise, like you mentioned, gardening is one, like working around the house, even older adults who just move a little bit every day naturally throughout the day, like they do in blue zones. They don't go to the gym, but they do walk up the hill to go to the grocery store and back. This is shown to be beneficial for brain health.
Yeah, I tell you, you know, I say this all the time, like the hero of my team is my mom, who, you know, is really the person day to day who takes care of my dad, and she's done a great job of creatively figuring out ways to keep her own health and fitness. And currently she goes on YouTube, and she's got this great series of exercises that you do right there in your living room, or she's doing kind of some chin-ups and pull-ups with some weight assistance and stuff. And you know, even if you're thinking like, oh, I'm stuck at home, whether it's from work or caregiving or whatever, there may be creative ways that you can find little snippets of time, and those things add up. Like, it's all about, you don't have to, it's not all or nothing when it's your diet or whatever else. Do a lot of little things, and they'll add up.